Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another lesson in Tanya. Just a short reminder, we are in the middle of the 6th chapter. We are holding on page 106, I believe. Just, what? Page 106. Just a very short reminder of what we studied thus far. Chapter 1, we spoke about the questions the Rabbi had and about the fact that there are two souls. Lesson 2, the Rabbi was concentrating on, chapter 2, the second soul. That's a godly soul. Lesson 3, 4, and 5 about the soul's powers or tools, garments, thought, speech, and action. And the Rabbi also went into the 10 attributes divided into two categories, the intellect and as well as the emotions. So together they are 10. This is up to here. Now, chapter 6, the Rabbi, 6, 7, 8, the Rabbi is going to talk about the impure soul. Within the impure soul, we have already discussed there are two categories. One is a neutral soul. We call it klipat nuga. Nuga means it does not defy God, but it does not serve God. It's not forbidden, but it's not for God's holy purpose. And the other category is the 3 impure klipot or defiled klipa, which is divided into 3. Somebody asked me, I believe last time, why are there 1 klipat nuga and in the second category there are 3? I searched and I found that klipat nuga is the first layer outside holiness. Therefore, there is only one step that it moves out. The 3 unclean klipa, there are 3 different levels, and one is further from holiness than the other. That's why there are 3. Another way of explaining it, nuga is right outside of holiness. So there's only one stage. Once you go farther from nuga, you have the unclean, defying God, disrespecting God, and there you have 3 different levels. It goes one farther than the other. That's why you have 3 versus 1 of nuga. But there are 2 categories. One which is neutral, as we have discovered and discussed. There is a possibility for purifying it and bringing it back to holiness, and that includes most of our daily activities that are not against God: eating lunch, assuming it's kosher, going to bed, socializing, living a life. The impure klipa, the 3 klipot, the 3 shells, are anything that is in defying God, which is not eating kosher, not celebrating Shabbat, cheating in business, lying. All those commandments God have commanded us to obey, and we disobey God. We started speaking, and this was my emphasis and will be my emphasis, because the more I study Hasidut, the more I realize that this is the main thrust of what holiness is. So I'm going to be pounding, and I've been doing the same on many other discussions. The most important connector to God is bitul. Bitul means self-nullification, humbling, humility. Moshe was the closest ever any human reached to God, and his greatest trait was that he was humble. So whenever you have an activity of a person or behavior that does not exercise bitul, humility, that's already a place for no God. God says, I cannot rest her. So what is klipat nuga? What is nuga that is not going against God? It's not breaking God's commandment. It's just about how I feel and what's in it for me, and why shouldn't I do it? If I do it, it will make me happy, or it will hurt, or will take away. It's more expensive, it's inconvenient, I have to get up early. It's all about me, 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 me. That's klipat nuga. Some of it may be forbidden. That belong already to a different categories. But the category of nuga is defined as something that I do for selfish reason. So if I get married for selfish reason, if I go on vacation for selfish reason, if I take a cruise, if I eat, if I buy a car, if I move somewhere, if I build a house based on my and me, only that's klipat nuga. It's not forbidden, but it separated itself from God. But what if I build a house so I can bring my family in, so I can enjoy with my spouse, to serve God with joy? And what if I buy very expensive food because I want my body to be healthy and to have a quality of life and to be living longer? Then I'm serving God. So the difference between klipat nuga and holiness is a very thin line. That's it's a nuance, you might think, but it's everything. And that's one of the chidush, one of the new ideas that the Alter Rebbe brings. And it's going to be, you're going to see it throughout the chapters, that all the rabbis, all the Hasidic masters have embraced and realized how powerful it is. Ali, you had a question?
I mean, you said it's a thin line, isn't it? I mean, if I do it for God, it's one thing, and if I do it for anything else,
it's ungodly, it's unholy, it's nuga. I will have an opportunity to elevate it, but I'll have to work on it. If it's a sin, if I stole the funds, I cheated the bank, and that's how I built my house, I will never be able to elevate it. It will never be holy. No matter how holy I use it for, I make it a synagogue, and I pray there, and I bring guests, and I feed them. Not going to be elevated simply because it was created with funds acquired in a way God forbade us. That should be very simple. However, when I buy a fancy car, I buy a very beautiful house, if I don't do it for God's sake, but for my own comfort, then it's nuga. So one day when I discovered that this is not the right way to live a life, I say, God, I would like that to be your home. I would like to make sure to open it up for guests. I would like to make sure I bring in food that's healthy for me. I would like to make sure there is no argument in the house. I would like to make sure I don't embellish or I don't renovate it just to make up and be the nicest house in the block. I'm just going to do it for your sake. Now it becomes holy. Now I've changed it, I elevated it. Yes, Harry?
So to buy yourself something for yourself, selfishly, but enjoy it, you get pleasure from it, that doesn't mean something.
That's nuga. Now, I'm not holy. Don't look at me. I do plenty like that.
Enjoy something fully.
If you need, so we will discover later on that anytime you have a meal, if you don't say it's for God's sake, it's assuming it's kosher, it's nuga, because it's not holy. And it's so simple to make it holy when you say, oh, you have in mind, you know why I'm eating now? So I should have a healthy body. Maintain your body is a mitzvah. To be able to socialize and smile when you see somebody is a mitzvah. I'm eating, so I should have a good, a nice, good-looking face, so people should enjoy my presence. That itself is a mitzvah. You need to have that in mind. I think I said it today in the morning, or sometimes at my grandfather every Shabbat, he would indulge in a nice meal and he would say Lechoved Shabbos Kodesh, in honor of the Shabbat. He would eat, and almost every 2 or 3 spoons in the he would slurp the soup or the chicken. He would say Lechoved Shabbos Kodesh, in honor of the Shabbat, the holy Shabbat. When I sit down to eat, I make it a habit. I'm not always. I say, God, I'm serving you. So that makes a big difference, by the way. Now suddenly you don't get angry if the food is a little overcooked or a little salty. You don't get angry if it's someone else got a nicer, bigger piece. You don't get angry if it's cold. You try to eat it even if you don't like it. It's not to your taste, because it's all about serving God. You can serve God with a smaller portion. You can serve God. Yes.
Rabbi, you eat a meal and enjoying it. You don't even think about anything, but then you give thanks to God with the
That's nuga. I'm sorry. Somebody said, we had an entire JLI class, and I was trying to define the difference in a meal between eating, if someone serves you ice cream at a meal, at the end of the meal is dessert, can it become holy or not? Or it stays in nougat? We know that the ice cream is kosher. And the best way to describe, I heard it from a friend, is ice cream itself can be holy. A particular flavor of ice cream is not. It's already about my favorite. If my wife serves me ice cream for dessert, out of respect, I accept that, and it becomes holy because it's part of the meal. She's entrusted with the meal. But when I say, I don't like chocolate, I like the strawberry, now it's about how I feel and what it tastes. You cannot say you serve God this way, and that's the difference. So a flavor of ice cream, makes a difference. That's where you can determine. Yes, Harry.
I'm speechless.
All right. I feel this is the main thrust of what we're going to discover about unholy and the three klipot, which is even farther down. You need to understand that nougat is a kosher meal, earned it in honesty, you didn't cheat or lie, you earned the money and you spend it well the way you decide, and God allows us to do that. But you can make it way better when you spend it for God's sake. God does not want us to live in a one-bedroom house. God does not want us to live without a jacuzzi. God does not want us to not go on vacation. He wants us because he wants us to have a happy, healthy life. That's our way, our body. But when you do it, have in mind that you do it for God's sake, because God wants us to enjoy life. God wants us, by the way, when someone dies, you know, one of the first questions, they give you a questionnaire when you go to heaven. One of them is, did you utilize all the opportunity to enjoy every allowable pleasure in this universe? If I had a safari nearby, if I have a zoo, if I have an opportunity to enjoy life and discover beautiful nature, and I did not, God will say, I created it for you. Why didn't you enjoy it? So there is a demand from God. But when you go on a safari and you go for vacation, realize you do it because you want to see God's wonders. You want to see how it will help you serve God better. Linda?
Yeah, I wasn't here last week, so maybe I missed.
We did not study last week.
Or both weeks
2 weeks ago. Yes.
The last class, but isn't Beneva the neutral? It's neutral. It's not good, it's
Yes.
not bad, and it's what you make it, right? Isn't Cleveland like meat? If you eat it to sustain your body, it's
Kosher meat.
Kosher meat. Yeah.
Kosher
So,
meat.
but
Yeah.
Beneva then is neutral. It's,
Right.
But you
So
make
what we have, okay, so this is last week, you missed it.
Okay, sorry.
Last week we discovered that there is only, it's a one-way, it's a black and white, simple as that. You have godliness connected to God. If it's not connected to God, it's inappropriate. Will I be punished for klipat nougat? No, but it's a missed opportunity. I had an opportunity to earn. Imagine you are going to walk, you travel to walk an hour, you arrive at work, you have 10 hours of earning a living. Every 10 minutes is a unit, every minute is a unit. Assuming that you decided to go idly and talk to people, you are not going to be paid for that time. We call it a waste. So you're going to, at the end of the day, get 8.5 hours paid, not 10 hours. And God will demand and say, you had this opportunity, why didn't you fill it? This is besides, outside the realm of sin. When someone commits a sin, then he has to pay to fix the damage they created. Assuming you didn't, in other words, I'm talking about going to walk, you didn't hurt, you didn't break the machine, you didn't break your tools. You just decide not to sit on the machine and operate the machine for those minutes or hours. God is going to say, why? Why didn't you? We spoke last week, last time I ended with a story, just to refresh your mind, that when God created evil, at first it was called Nachash HaKadmoni, the earlier serpent. Anybody remember that then when Adam did teshuvah, God changed it to the devil of death, the angel of death. And then Abraham came and he changed it to Satan. And then came the Moses and the angel and the Satan says, nobody is listening to me. God says, we'll do refresh, we'll do a renewal, we'll rename you to a yesh, self-centered. And then came the Baal Shem Tov and got rid of yesh. So the yesh came to God and says, nobody listens to me. God says, we'll do our Gosha Sayesh. We will instill you in scholars, in great scholars, Torah scholars. But when they study to get honored, to be respected. And by doing so, all their study is going in the opposite direction of connecting to God. And that's the issue that we need to fight. Anybody remember the story I told you? Do you remember the story? The guy came to the Rabbi, the second Rabbi, and asked, how do I get rid of my self-centered, my ego? And the Rabbi said, let's find out what's the ego that you're fighting for. And the Rabbi went through the levels, different names, and explained to him that it's not necessarily the desire to sin. It's the desire to be honored and respected for being a great guy or to doing great. By doing so, we actually are serving the opposite of what God is. The ego, yes. So this is what we studied so far. Today, we hope to finish chapter 6, and we're going to get in now to the separation of the two souls. A large part of today's class is going to be technical, so I'm going to go over a little fast. We are on page 106. Anything, however, that does not surrender itself to God, but considers itself as if it is a thing separate unto itself, does not receive its life from the holiness of God. Klipat Nuga is the opposite. We will find out where the energy comes from, but it does not come from God. And at that point, you cut yourself out of God. There was a Parush. You know what? You heard the word Parush, right? How do you translate Parush? Someone who totally separated from itself from the universe. Parush means separated, like a Nazarite, like a monk. No. A great scholar, someone who studied Torah all day and prayed, didn't go home, did not socialize with his wife and children. He wanted to devote himself to God. So you would study all day in the synagogue. They built them. By the way, this was part of tradition until the Baal Shem Tov got rid of it. And here is one story. They used to build themselves a little room in the synagogue where they are totally removed from the children and the wife. And they would study all day. The wife will bring them lunch and dinner. They will fast most of the time, study there, and sleep there. Only Friday night and Shabbat they will spend with the family. Sometimes. Some of them wouldn't even do that. And this way they grow in their service of God because they study all day long. They pray. They are considered Parush. Parush in Hebrew means separated. Remove themselves from the universe. There was a Parush, such a man in a town where every Friday afternoon the tradition was to go to the mikveh, to the bathhouse, to clean oneself before Shabbat. So everybody would go to the mikveh, pay, bring their towels and soap, and they washed themselves because they didn't have showers at home. And then they would go out. When they went out, he had a little chair. And he sat down and studied. He brought his chair from the synagogue to the mikveh, outside the mikveh. So when everybody left, they would say to him, Good Shabbos, Parush. They would greet him, oh, may you be blessed for Shabbos, holy man. Something like that. The Baal Shem Tov once visited that town and they introduced him to this man. So the Baal Shem Tov asked that they remove that chair next week from the mikveh. They shouldn't do. He was sitting on a rock. They should remove the rock away so he shouldn't have a place to sit down. And they actually did it. 3 days later, he died. And the Baal Shem Tov says that all his life sustenance came from impurity. And he derived his sustenance from the Good Shabbos, Parosh, Good Shabbos, you holy scholar. He would study Torah and pray to God and be separated from his wife and children so that everybody would admire and honor him. So when they come out of the mikveh, they wish him Good Shabbos, holy man. As soon as he took away the rock, he had no place to stand and he didn't get that honor. He had lost the desire to live anymore because the evil did not get the honor that it was looking for, and there was no desire anymore to live. In other words, I hope you got the point of the story. Not necessarily anybody who's studying Torah, they serve God. Not necessarily anybody who has a long beard and they pray for a long time, they're holy people. There might be people who are totally the opposite. They go to work and they don't read they don't study much Torah and they don't pray a long time. They might be holy people because everything they do is for God's sake. So they're always connected to God. Yet some people might seemingly do all the motions and study Torah all day long, but their intention, their purpose, the reason is not necessarily the right purpose. And then they are cutting themselves out of God. Because anytime you do something, study Torah, pray to God, do a mitzvah, go to work. If you do it for God's sake, you're connecting with God. You don't do it for God's sake, you're not connected to God. So it's not coming from godliness. There is no middle ground. There is no, I do a mitzvah, but if I don't do a sin, I also am a holy man. There is no such thing. Either you're holy by connected to God, by being connected to God, or if you're not connected to God, you're the opposite. You're on the other side. And that's what the Rabbi is saying. So I'm reading it again. Anything, however, that does not surrender itself to God, but considers itself as if it is a thing separate unto itself, does not receive its life from the holiness of God. But where now the Rabbi is going to go into the technical question, but where else would it receive its vitality? Godliness and holiness is the source of vitality for every existing being. As it is written, you give life to them all. In the prophet, the Alter Rebbe goes on to qualify his previous remark, stating that those beings which do not surrender themselves to God receive the vitality only from the superficial, external level of godliness, and from this level too, only when it descends degree by degree through numerous contractions and of life force. We already talked about it before, about those who rebel against God, and the Rabbi is going to go back to it. Where do somebody who do not serve God get vitality? From Klipat Nuga, if he does not sin. If sin, from the three unholy Klippa. In other words, it's all from God, but it came down in a very, on many levels and changes until by the time it reaches this universe, there is no godliness in there. And that's what the Rabbi is going to explain. To return to the Alter Rebbe's words, the self-styled separate being does not receive its vitality from the pnimiyut. Pnimiyut is internal, the inner aspect of holiness, from its very essence and core, but from its achoraim, its hind part, so to speak. And the Rabbi in the explanation, to bestow from one's pnimiyut, literally one space, panim, pnimiyut is internal, it's all the same root, means, as explained chapter 22, to give with a pleasurable will and desire. Achoraim, literally behind one's back, means to bestow without desire or pleasure, out of some extenuating factor. The giver's attitude will be apparent in either case in his manner of giving. If one gives something to his enemy, for example, he will avert his face from him, for one's face represents his inner feelings. Since the giver's heart is not in his gift, he turns his face away, presenting his enemy with his back. Thus, pnimiyut and achoraim, in the sense of internal and external aspects of one's will, are related to the literal meanings of face and rear. What the Rabbi is saying is, when we connect to God, we get from the face of God, from the internal, from the face. When you disobey God, when you disrespect God, or you disconnected from God, you get energy, you stay alive. But it comes from behind, from the rear. It comes against, like someone who hates somebody and is forced to deliver a message, deliver a gift. He does it without even looking at his face. Why? He don't want to shine his face to him because face represents internal. In our context, everything in the realm of holiness, whose existence and life God desires, receive its life from the pnimiut of godliness, while the klipot, in other words, nuga or the other three, in which God has no desire, since he created them only for the reasons given in the paragraph introduced in this chapter, receive their life from the achoraim of godliness. We spoke at the beginning, and it's very important to remember that because the Rabbi is going to get into it. At the beginning of the chapter, the Rabbi said that anything God created, he created its opposite. So there should be a balance. Just like there is holiness with 10 spirot, 10 attributes, there are unholiness with 10. Just there is a godly soul, there is unholy soul. Anything God created in holiness, he created its opposite. Why? The Rabbi explained before, so it should be challenged serving God. We should be worthy of reward for serving God. Because if you have no choice, it's the only choice, there is no reward given for somebody without putting an effort. However, when you have a challenge, therefore it has to be equal. It's like two sides of the yin and yang, like two sides of a coin. You must have two opposites. Now the Rabbi is going to go about the two opposites. So when I'm connecting to holiness, I'm on one side. When I'm disconnected from holiness, I'm on the other side. It can be two levels of the other side, but the other side is the opposite of holiness. I'm not connected to God. And the Rabbi explains, this limited form of life force reaches the klipot by descending degree by degree through myriads of levels in the chain-like descent of the worlds in the manner of cause and effect. And even that cause and effect is not enough. The vitality, I'm skipping the one paragraph, the vitality descends also through many tzimtzumim or contractions. And this process diminishes the vitality to the point where it is incomparably lower than in its original state. The Rabbi is saying, remember we talked about a chain link, one holding the other, but that's not enough. It will not conceal the energy. So the energy goes through contractions. I remember, if you remember, I explained to you that you have a sun outside and you have a curtain, a burlap that covers the window, and there's a little light comes in. You cannot connect it to the sun. Then you have another room inside the room, and again, it's all dark, and there is one window with burlap cloth that covers. A little light came from the first room and goes to the fourth room. By that fourth room, it's solely dark, but you can imagine, or you can be told by people who have been to the second or third room about the sun. So God had removed himself so much by the time the energy is converted into klipat nuga, that energy that gives life force, it's totally, it can be denied. You can deny its creator. You can deny, in other words, chain and link, you can always relate to the source. How do I know? If you shake the bottom link, it will affect, it may take a while, but it will affect the upper one because there is a direct connection. Even though it's very far, it's 10 stories high, but the chain, if I shook the one on the bottom, it affects every single link. When it comes to contractions, you will not be able to trace it back. If I affect here, I change, I'd misuse that energy, it will not affect the creator or the source where the energy came from. So there has to be contraction and there has to be chain link, cause and effect, so to say. These are the two levels of contraction. So greatly diminished does the light and life force become, diminution after diminution, until it is able to become contracted and closed in a matter of exile, meaning that instead of being surrendered to the divine life force, the object in which the vitality is clothed masters it, as for example, a captive in exile is mastered by his captors. The vitality is thus in a state of exile within the object which considers itself separate from holiness, giving it vitality and existence, causing the object to pass from non-existence to existence. So in other words, what the rabbi is saying, I'm not going to go again over and over, but the rabbi, this is a point the rabbi made before. Unholy, defilement, impure, receives its vitality from God. God created it. But God created it to challenge us, to make us stay away and not connect to it. But when we do connect to it, that's where we get our energy from. How does energy exist there? It came from the rear, from the behind, the back, and God went through many contractions that it cannot be traced directly to God. And it's called the opposite of God because it goes against God's will. So if I do serve God, I fulfill a mitzvah. If I enjoy life for the sake of God, I'm connected to God. I get my energy from the godly source. If I do not connect with God, I separate myself from God. Then I get it from Klipat Nuga or from the three Klipot. But they are getting their energy also from God, except it comes to a very small point. To a very small one. The vitality is thus, we are on page 108. The vitality is thus in a state of exile within that object which considers itself separate from holiness, giving it vitality and existence, causing that object to pass from non-existent to existence, so that it does not return to its original state of non-existence, as it was before it was created by the vitality clause in it. God don't want us, as soon as we do a sin, or as soon as we separate from God, to go to be non-existent. Because if I separate myself from godliness, there is no energy. Therefore, God allows for energy to come through the defiled part, from the behind side, from the opposite side. But it's very, very small. Why is it so small in quality? So it does not feel like it's coming from God. And it gives us vitality and energy so we can continue to live. So that it does not return to its original state of non-existence as it was before it was created by the vitality clause in it. I hope everybody can relate to it. I try to do my best. In brief, all that is not surrendered to God, but considers itself separate from Him, receives its vitality from the achoraim, from behind, from the rear of godliness, by way of numerous descents and various contractions. The divine life force is concealed within it in a state of exile. Thus, it belongs to the realm of Klippa. It is now clear why any thought, word, or action not directed towards serving God, hence not surrendered to godliness, is a garment of the animal soul that derives from Klippa. Even if that thought, word, and deed is not actually evil, it's not a sin. I hope it was clear. I hope I made myself clear. Again, whenever you speak, you think. It's anything that is not for the sake of God directly, it is opposite of godliness. It comes from Klippa. You have two levels. You have one that's a sin, and that will be much difficult to convert, to change. Or you have one that's neutral, animal soul, Klippat Nuga, which is also receiving energy from God, but godliness is so in exile, so to say, in there, and therefore the energy that comes is very minute.
So in essence, you're expecting every act that you do to do it just for the sake of heaven. But you can't go through life thinking that all the time unless just so.
Here is what the Rabbi is going to address this point. That is why this world with all its contains is called the world of Klippa and Sitra Achra, despite the fact that this world too receives its vitality from God's holiness. Majority, and here is that's why we call it the world of Sitra Achra, of Klippa, the world of evil. Here it is. Since the creatures of this physical world feel themselves to be independent, separate beings, and their surrender to godliness is not apparent, it's very unusual, they automatically belong to the realm of Klippa. This is also why all affairs of this world are severe and evil, and the wicked prevail in it, as it is written in Chaim. According to Kabbalah, majority of the universe are evil people. Majority of our deeds are evil. Now, I'm not talking about evil as a mass murderer, God forbid. Evil, we refer to receiving our vitality from the other side, from Klippa. Okay, does that, it's straight to your point.
No,
It gives you, it shocks you, right?
no, it just makes you feel like you have to be robotic about everything you do.
No, it makes us feel as human being, meaning that God does not, never expects us to be angels. God knows that majority of our deeds are inappropriate. And yet, he enjoys the little bit that we do.
Boy, he must be very happy with me.
Ah,
He must be very happy with
he
me.
should be happy with you, and with me, and with you, and with everybody around us. The Lubavitch Rabbi, I know some people may not like this and politically incorrect, but I'm very proud of it. Somebody went in to visit with the Rabbi, and he turned to the Rabbi and he says, how come you tell your emissaries to connect with Jewish people who are members of the Reformed temples and conservative temples? They don't serve God. They are there for themselves. And the Rabbi said to him, I want you to know, this was a Jewish leader in the Orthodox community. And it's a Goy Semacher. And the Rebbe told him, when the president of a temple or a member of a Reformed temple goes to temple once a year on Yom Kippur, he wakes up in the morning on Yom Kippur and he drinks his coffee. So he already broke his fast. He then goes to the bathroom and shaves his beard. So he violated another major law. Then he goes on to get dressed and he leaves the house, get into his car. So he broke another law and he drives to temple. And maybe on the way he smokes a cigarette. So that's another breaking of the law. And he enters the synagogue by producing a ticket, which is violating a law. You're not allowed to carry on the holiday. Do you know how many laws he violated? But he goes to synagogue and he thinks to himself, today is Yom Kippur and God asked us to be in synagogue. And that's where I'm going. The immense pleasure God derives from that Jew is immeasurable. You know why? No justification for every one of those deeds that God forbade us from doing. There is no justification. I'm not going to say it's acceptable. But the fact that a little bit good is there supersedes and overpowers every single one of those federal crimes that he trespassed. Because in essence, you think it's only a member of a reform, but it's me. I'm sorry, if you think I'm a very holy rabbi, maybe you came to the wrong place. Every single human being, majority of our deeds are not about God. So the little that we do is very cherished by God. To me, this is very powerful. It removes the veil from what's concealed from the reality. If we do a little bit of good, just a little bit, once a day, once a week, the value that God appreciates it is unbelievable.
You know, we had
Do you understand that? Are you clear? Are you sure you understand that? Okay.
here's something interesting. I lived in New Jersey for.
You live in New
I
Jersey?
lived in New Jersey for 50 years.
Okay.
And we had a.
That's a sin right now.
We had a dog now, so it was a Lubavitch Rabbi, named
I know him very well.
Shalom. So he passed away, and I went to pay Shiva call. His sons were there, who also Rabbanim out in the island. And one woman said two of them were sitting there, and one said to them, Rabbi, how can you reconcile people driving through on Shabbos? You know what he answered? We're trying to teach him how to walk.
Very good.
So it was a very good point.
The point I was making is even further. We have no intended change. Just the very fact of that person being in temple, Reformed temple, on Yom Kippur in itself makes God extremely, extremely proud of that Jew. Do you understand that?
It's what you
Linda.
I'm sorry, I was just gonna add that we also don't know how many steps he took spiritually to do that. He may
We
take
are,
10, 20 steps and how difficult it was for him. We don't know. So
it's irrelevant. The point to be made is every single deed that is connecting to God is invaluable. The fact that before and after we were not connected to God does not cast an iota of darkness towards that the good deed. And I think we discovered that evil is temporarily, it's not real. Because when God brings Mashiach, all evil will be gone, so we will cleanse. Our holiness is real. So if, let's say, I'm up for 15 hours, and only half an hour of the day was pure holiness, that half hour is permanent. All the other 14 and a half hours that I wasted are temporary. They can be repaired, and they will be gone one day. That half hour will never be gone. It's something, a treasure that I possess that will never change. You understand?
isn't progress important? In other words, how many where you were before, and then you make steps to go, it doesn't matter.
Progress is extremely important, and a person is judged, and their expectations are based on their path. Where do they stand? So if one person don't keep kosher and me don't keep kosher, the consequences are very severe to the person who always keep kosher, no doubt. But I'm speaking about the positive aspects. When I choose to connect with God, it's pure connection to God. It doesn't matter if before I sinned or most of my day was not right. In that way, it's all equal. Everybody can achieve that connection, serving God.
The superiority of the Baal Shem Tov, of the Baal Teshuva.
That's the Baal Teshuva.
Superiority.
But I just want you to, the point that I want to make is majority of our life in every realm, in the universe, in the personal life, in our relationship with God, majority are disconnected with God. That's why it's called the world of evil. However, the little bit that we do connect is what counts. This is what God is looking for. This is what makes God very proud. Does God expect me to be that holy? Maybe. But when I'm that holy, God is very proud, because that's permanent. That's an achievement. You go fishing a whole day. I'm trying to find an example. You go fishing, you stand there and you cast your fly in rod the whole day. You caught only one fish. Will that make you proud? Very, very big proud. A medium-sized fish. Very proud. The fact that you spent 11 hours and it was wasted. I have children, they say, I wasted my day, I didn't catch any fish. I said to them, fishing, you go fishing, not to catch fish, you know. You go to... So the idea here that the little bit that we make pure, made pure, is invaluable. It's very powerful. So I'm reading this paragraph again. This is also why all affairs of this world are severe and evil, and the wicked prevail in it. So anytime you live in this history of the universe, wicked people will prevail. They are the one who run the show. They are the one who will succeed. If you have a righteous versus a wicked, majority of time the wicked will win. So in politics, in decision making, in just running the show, this is the universe we live in. It's part of the challenge. In the following note, referring to his previous statement that this is a world of klipot, the Alter Rebbe writes that this is so, notwithstanding the fact that godliness pervades all existence, or stated in the terminology of Kabbalah, that God's infinite light, or Ein Sof, clothes itself in the spirit of four worlds, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, and thereby even this physical world is filled with the Or Ein Sof. Yet, despite all this, it is still a world of klipot. Before I read the note that the Rabbi added, it's a very technical, I'm going to give you an introduction so it's easy to go. The Rabbi is saying that no matter how far this world will go in the level of defilement and disobeying God, the energy that comes here at the end comes from God. We call it Or Ein Sof, the energy without limitation. And the way it comes is that that light closes itself in one garment, and that closes itself in another garment, and another garment, and another garment. So by the time you look at the outer garment, you can still realize, you don't see it, you don't feel it, that the energy there is actually the godliness, the pure godliness. Except by the time it comes to the four external garment, it is very, very far, but it's still the same. Just like in electricity, if I am to use an example, you have the plant, the power plant. That's where you have electricity. If someone were to come close and touch the cable there, they would turn into coal, right? Electricity and dead in a second. So it goes through our wires, the grid. It comes before it enters the building. Let's say it's very powerful, right? Then you have 220, then you have 110. Then you have for the computer, you need only for 70 watts, 115. Then it's transformers to minimize it and minimize it. Now, if you have something that you don't even want to know if there is electricity there, a device that requires one volt, a half a volt, you got the transformer go to such an extent that by the time the wire enters into that iPhone, or it's only 2 volts, it's very little. But the energy, electricity, it's the same as in the power plant, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to perform what it's doing. Only electricity can perform, run a fan or make you the chip, the memory chip, etc. All that must be with electricity. It's the same electricity you have in a power plant. However, it went through many, many changes. By the time you look at this, you don't see the power plant. The power that comes out of the power plant is buzzing. It makes a very loud noise because it's very powerful. Not here, but you know that it's the same. The quality is the same, exactly the same. That's what the Rabbi is saying. There are 4 worlds. The 4 worlds, usually we talked about 1, 2, 3, 4, and we are in the lowest. And in another way of saying it is 1, inside of it is the higher world, inside of it is the higher world, inside of it is the higher world, and in the center is Or Ein Sof, is the energy of godliness. So by the time it reaches the external universe, it's already went through another 3 universes. This is number 4. By that time, you can't see it as godliness, but it is godliness. That's what the Rabbi is saying. To be sure, this is in the gray section. To be sure, this world contains the 10 Sfirot, the world of Asiyah, as it is written in Chaim, and the Rabbi explains. The world of Asiyah, this is action, this universe, comprises both our physical world and the spiritual world of Asiyah. The Sfirot of the spiritual Asiyah are, however, contained in the physical Asiyah as well. Now, within these 10 Sfirot of Asiyah are contained the 10 Sfirot of the world of Yetzirah, the one higher than this world. And within them, the 10 Sfirot of the world of Bria. And then the 10 Sfirot of the world of Atzilut, in which abides the Or Ein Sof. So you have Or Ein Sof goes through all the 4 universes by the time it reaches this universe. Thus, the Or Ein Sof, godliness itself, pervades this entire lowest world by being clothed in the 10 Sfirot of the 4 worlds, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. So you have 4 universes with 10 attributes, and it goes through the 10 levels, and then it goes into a second world, and a third world, and a fourth world. By the time it reaches this universe, the energy is so minute, but it contains the same exact quality as the energy that's there outside. As it is written in Eitz Chaim, Portal 47, chapter 2, and in Sefer Gilgulim. Yet, because the creatures of this world are not openly surrendered to God, this is a world of Klippa and Sitra Achra. That's why this universe is called the way it is. Until here, now I'm going to give you a summary of what the introduction. The rabbi is going to divide klipa into two separate levels. You have one that's called nuga. Nuga, as I said, separated from God. And you have one that's called totally defying God, opposite God, disobeying God. And there are three within that level. However, the klipot are divided into two categories, one lower than the other. The lower category consists of three completely unclean and evil klipot, containing no good whatsoever. In other words, I'm on the bottom, I just finished page 110. In other words, what the rabbi is saying, if I connect with the three klipot with the second lower level, there is no good and no positive. So even if I do a mitzvah with it, there is no mitzvah, there is no good, there is no connection to God. It can only be repaired by repenting. And even the repentance is not so simple, it will not bring back the way it was before under many circumstances. Klipat Nuga, on the other hand, can be converted into holiness very fast. In other words, it's a positive energy that is disconnected. Evil, the second level, is negative energy. There is nothing good that can be done with it. There is nothing positive can come out. So if I use a Torah to hit somebody, even though it's a holy scroll, if I use a holy book to slap someone in the face, it's a holy book, but my deed is evil, and there is no positive, there is no way of converting and elevating it to holiness. In the prophet Ezekiel's vision of the divine chariot, in which he saw and described the forces that conceal godliness, they are described as a storm wind, a great cloud, and a flaring fire, representing these three holy, unclean klipot. The Ezekiel is speaking about the Jewish people going to exile and about God who will conceal himself. And the God when conceal himself will be described or represented by three different ways. One is called a very storm wind, a very heavy cloud, and the third one is a fire, very strong fire. All are evil doers, all they are destruction, and all are bad for human beings. From them flow and are derived the souls of all nations of the world and the sustaining force of their bodies, which sustains their existence apart from the soul which animates them. However, also derived from these klipot are the souls of the living creatures that are unclean and forbidden to be eaten, and sustaining force of their bodies. The existence of life of all forbidden vegetation, too, such as orla, the first 3 years of a fruit or tree of a tree, which is forbidden for consumption, and a mixture of grain seeds in a vineyard. If you plant two seeds of separate plants, you have a grapes and you have a lemon, grapes and orange, they are forbidden. It's a forbidden mixture. And so forth are derived from the tree, these klipot, as is written in Chaim, Portal 49, chapter 6. Similarly, the existence and life of any act, utterance, or thought in violation of any of one of the 365 biblical prohibitions, as well as the rabbinic offshoots, are all derived from these three impure klipot, as is written there, end of chapter 5. The animal soul, on the other hand, is of klipat nuga, which contains an element of good, as mentioned in chapter 1. These sinful garments, belonging to the realm of holy impure klipot, are thus lower than the animal soul itself, and drag it down to their level, in exact opposition to the divine soul's garments of thought, speech, and action, of Torah and the mitzvot, which are higher than the soul yet elevated. What he's making here is a very important point. Remember, we spoke about holy and unholy are opposite each other. In holiness, we describe that the thought, speech, and action, the garments of the human, can elevate the man to a much higher than the soul itself. They are greater than the soul. Anybody remember that? We spoke about that length. Says the Rabbi, in the opposite, the same thing. In the unclean soul that we possess that soul. But in itself, it's unable to cause any damage. It's like gunpowder. You need the gun to inflict damage. Now, when you have the gun is considered worse, can take you to a worse place, to a much lower space than the gunpowder or the bullets that you store in your house. The thought, speech, and action are the garments of the evil soul, are more powerful than the evil soul itself. And they can drive a person to a much farther, lower level than the evil soul itself is. Because the evil soul itself is opposite of God. It defies God. It don't want to serve God. But as long as it's not engaged in thought, speech, and action, it didn't do any damage. It still exists there. But what happens when someone screams or yells or curses or lies, or does with action, or with thinking inappropriate against a sin? Now they have taken their life, their soul, and dragged it down to a much lower space. And for doing so, the garments are considered way worse than the evil soul itself. Just like in holiness, the garments are holier than the soul, are more powerful than the soul because they can elevate. In the unholiness, the garments can lower the evil soul lower than where it stays. And that's the conclusion of this week. We discovered very, very, very briefly the two souls. Next week and the following, we'll talk about in details. But the main point, again, is for me, what I take. Sin is from the evil soul. The garments of the evil soul take you worse than where the evil soul can take you, can be. Nuga is any time we are not engaging in holiness. Anytime it's disengaging in holiness, we're engaging in the opposite of holiness, which is Nuga, which is separated from God. And this concludes our lesson today. God willing, we'll continue next week.